All right, the time is 7:31. I will call this November 17th meeting of the Yardley Borough Council to order. I'm going to mute everyone quickly and ask you to please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First up, Marianne, if you could do our roll call.
Thompson.
Here.
Ms. Siegel Morris.
Here.
Mr. Feiner.
Here.
Can.
Here.
Mr. Curtin.
Present.
Mr. Brea.
Here.
Mr. Ross.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are also joined by Mayor Harding and Manager Johnson this evening. First, we'll move to the community announcements portion of the meeting. At this point, if any member of council has an item of note they would like to share with the public, now is the time to do so. All right, hearing none, I'll offer the same opportunity to members of the public who are in attendance tonight. If you have a noteworthy item, upcoming event, something of that nature you'd like to share, please use the raise hand feature and I will acknowledge you to share that item. All right, I see Susan Taylor. Unmute yourself, go ahead.
Hi. Unfortunately, the Yardley Historical Association has had to cancel our scheduled open houses at the old library. We were going to have them on December 5th, 12th, and 19th with the train set up because of COVID. But we're looking into having the old library building lined, essentially outlined with lights for the season to make it a little cheerier. We hope that works out. And that will be done in the memory of Bill Forkas, a former Yardley Borough Council person and auditor, if we can accomplish that.
Thank you. Are there any other community announcements this evening? All right, hearing none, I'm just going to issue a blanket statement at this time that Ms. Taylor did allude to, which is obviously COVID cases are on the rise again. We've all been seeing the news. Our neighbors in Philadelphia have issued some new restrictions, and it is reasonable to anticipate that those may be happening at a state or county level in the near future. We have no new information to share at this time as a borough. However, we will do our very best as we receive information to distribute that on all of our channels. So nothing new to share at this time, but we will make sure to get information out as it becomes available to us. All right, with that, we are going to close community announcements and move on to the public comment portion of the meeting. This is the portion of the meeting during which members of the public may address council regarding items that do not appear on the agenda. If you wish to comment upon an item that does appear on our agenda, you will be given an opportunity to do so during council's consideration of that agenda item. Members of the public are asked to please state their name and address for the record before comment. I'm also going to add, just for the order of the meeting, ask that you wait until you are acknowledged by the chair to unmute yourself to speak. And also a note, and I will be frank, public comment is not an opportunity to talk about individuals, whether that be a member of council or a member of the public. We are all adults here, and I think we can keep this professional. So I will ask, is there any public comment this evening? And again, you can utilize the raise hand feature to be acknowledged. And I see Kim P. Go ahead, unmute yourself, and you may make your comment.
At the last meeting, Mr. Bria, you abruptly cut me off, and your reasoning for doing so was unfounded. I did not engage in crosstalk, as you alleged. I did not engage in accusation. I merely stated a fact and asked a question before I was rudely interrupted by John Perlmutter, in which then you took the opportunity to kick us both out of the meeting. This is a public meeting and it is public comment, and my First Amendment rights allow me to make comments about things that have occurred in the borough and in prior meetings and in the meeting that we are in tonight. And so I'm going to state my piece, and I certainly hope that you choose not to kick me out of the meeting, simply because I have every right to proceed with my comments this evening. You stated, Mr. Bria, that you don't want people to make accusations, but that is exactly what John Perlmutter did on October 20th. And I'm going to quote what she started with. She said, and I quote, 20 West College Avenue, a single family residence since 1810, was converted to apartments after it was purchased in October 2017. That statement, Mr. Bria, is an accusation that the owners of 20 West College Avenue turned it into apartments illegally. There are members of council, the borough solicitor, the borough manager, and code enforcement official that were in attendance in that meeting all know that statement is false. No one took the time at the end of Ms. Perlmutter's defamatory comments about the owners of that home to set the record straight. Simply that 20 West College Avenue has been apartments for more than 20 years, 30 years actually, and it was apartments before Ms. Perlmutter even moved into that house that she lives in on 18 West College Avenue. Now, I completely understand that members of council and the solicitor and employees of the borough do not want to engage with her. I do understand that, but I also need people to understand that she is lying and she's making false accusations, and I will use whatever platform she uses to refute those comments, Mr. Bria. And that is my right. If I don't refute those comments and nobody else does, people may then begin to believe that she is accurate in what she's saying, and she's not. And I will say that a normal balanced person would try to figure out why she does this, what her end goal is. I believe that her end goal is to get us to sell 20 West College Avenue simply because my husband is a minority. I know that you don't want to hear this, and I know that people in the borough are tired of it. This has been going on for over 4 years now. I've endured this. My husband has endured this. The public has had to witness it and be a part of it. I'm really tired of it. She has said on more than one occasion to my husband, go back to where you came from. And that is unfortunate. I believe that to be a racist comment by her. She targets the people that work for us. She's threatened workers to call INS on them. She tried to get,
We are
Mr.
venturing
Brand, I have every right to say
territory.
this.
We are coming up on time. I will ask you to please wrap up in the next 30 seconds.
Okay, I will wrap it up by simply saying Dawn Perlmutter now has 12 cameras on her house facing my house. And you have to wonder why you would put 12 cameras on a home facing your neighbor, other than to watch what, I don't know, the 3 young men that live in that house now are doing. I would say that read the article that Dawn Perlmutter published on July 13th, 2020, to know how she feels about the residents of the borough and minorities. And I simply ask that people of the borough to ask Dawn Perlmutter to stop, because she's wasting dollars, tax dollars, and resources for the borough. I want her to stop targeting me, targeting minorities, and wasting taxpayer money. Thank you.
We as council have spent a lot of time hearing about, I'll call it a saga, between the neighbors at 18 and 20 West College Avenue. And I will say only this, which is what we have told both parties involved numerous times, which is that the conflict is far outside the purview of Borough Council to settle. I've heard that it comes down to a property dispute, which needs to be taken to the county level where the courts can handle that decision. And likewise, many of the other accusations that go in both directions are not something we as council can take care of. It is wasting all of our time to have to endure this every meeting, and more so, the time spent by our staff dealing with both parties coming into the office every day, the right to know requests that are repetitive and without any meaningful end or objective. I am not here to try to figure out who is right or who is wrong, nor do I have any interest in weighing into that. But I will simply say this, that the conflict is not one that we as council can solve. So if the outcome is that we spend 10 minutes every public comment hearing our bi-weekly update, then so be it. But I just want to be very clear for everyone else and for both parties involved. This is not something we can handle. Take it to the courts if that's where it needs to be. And that's all. And with that, I see our next public comment is from Dr. Perlmutter. Go ahead, unmute yourself. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I would like to clarify, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to clarify some things. First of all, we are not neighbors. And Yardley Borough Council meetings, what you call a saga, is basically not taking any responsibility for the code enforcement issues that I have brought up. Yardley Borough Council follows Robert's Rules of Order, and they prohibit name calling, insults, personal attacks. I was just called a racist. You allowed this from a person who does not live in Yardley Borough, is not a resident. Allegations of racism are very popular right now, and it's a method to detract from actual issues. And when I bring up issues, I cite specific codes, specific ordinances about code enforcement that are not just at 20 West College, but at a number of places in the borough. Code enforcement has been an ongoing issue. Miss Prickett, who lives in Lower Makefield on Big Oak Road, every time that, and we are in civil situations, and the borough has made decisions. You have allowed them to take my property when I was on a business trip. You've allowed things, so don't act like you're a bystander in a saga. This is real life, people's real properties, and this was never done correctly. I do not mention their name when I bring things up, and allowing someone to go on and play the race card. And they've done this with everyone, the chief of police, they've done it with other residents, they've done it with the chair of HARB. Every time they have to meet the same standards as every other Yardley resident with codes and zoning, the race card is played, and these crazy allegations of harassment come out. What's happening now is there is a property dispute, and I did bring in a surveyor, and they're angry about it because I'm going to take my property back. And the borough, what I brought to your attention is that there are zoning issues here that should have been taken to the planning commission before any of this was done. There's impervious surface issues. The name calling is not going to work this time. You can play the race card, but it's not going to work. And you should not, as president of Borough Council, allow someone to make those kinds of accusations and then to just relegate this to a saga. It's not a saga. This is my property. I've lived here a long time. I've invested a lot of money in it. So do not relegate it to that. And I'm entitled to right to know request. And I have taken it to the county and I've taken it to the state and it's being corrected. And that is the exact reason that these allegations of racism are happening right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any additional public comment this evening? Again, if you wish to be recognized, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom. And if you're having trouble with that, you can always just give us a wave. And I'm looking through, don't see any. So with that, we will close the public comment portion of the meeting and move on to item 6, which is consideration of the consent agenda for tonight, November 17th. It consists of 3 items. It's approval of the minutes from our November 4th meeting, the bills list dated for today, November 17th, and an event permit for a parade on the 16th. Would any member of council like one of these items to be considered separately from the consent agenda? All right, hearing none, is there a motion for approval of tonight's consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion was made by Ms. Thompson, seconded by Mr. McCann. Any questions or comments from council or the mayor? Questions or comments from the public? I see Dr. Perlmutter. Unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to correct the minutes. First of all, we don't get to see the minutes of the meeting prior to you voting on them. So it always goes into sort of a correction situation. I don't understand why we can't see the proposed minutes prior to them being corrected. But I guess that's another issue. I would like to correct the minutes from the October 20th, 2020 meeting. My comments were written as just simply code enforcement and violation issues. And that's part of the problem. You call it a saga, but I was very specific, and I would like to correct the minutes that I spoke at the meeting, that there were specific violations at 20 West College Avenue, including chapter 403.65 of the Pennsylvania Uniform Construction Code. A building code official shall issue a certificate of occupancy. I also cited Yardley Borough Code section 27-1102, conversion of a single family detached dwelling, the requirements for that. I cited Yardley Borough Code 27-1106, buffer requirements.
Dr. Perlmutter, so the minutes are, they're a document that is approved by council as a record of the meeting. And Bucky may be able to elaborate a little bit more on this. Minute requirements for some of these meetings are pretty thin. So Bucky, actually, if you just want to elaborate on this.
Yes, let me follow up on that. Yes, the minutes are for council to approve or, amend, not for members of the public, really. And the Sunshine Act, when it comes to public comment, only requires that, the name of the person who provides comment and the general subject matter of the commentary, and that's it. So there's really no other requirement to include details of any public comment.
Well, thank you. But without those requirements, then you just relay everything to a saga. It's the details that are very important in these meetings. I understand it might not be required, but it's no transparency if you're not documenting the official minutes. Then you can just claim that people are making allegations when this is pretty important details. So I just really don't understand why they're not put in a little more specific. I can understand you don't want a whole book, but it's like very important, especially when tonight you're accusing, you're just relegating the situation to a saga when there's very specific ordinances being violated.
We have, again, the minutes are subject to the approval of council. At any time when we approve them, a member of council may offer an amendment It's also worth noting that our meetings are recorded and posted. So a complete record of these meetings does exist, even if it does not exist in the typed minutes.
Well, they're the official.
I know that.
They're official. They
Dr.
should be
Perlmutter,
official.
we are going to move on from this. You know, it's a discussion that has come up before. Other municipalities do pay to have the entire transcript written out. We don't do that because we feel it's unnecessary and an expense, you know, that we don't want to take on. All right, so are there any other comments from the public regarding the consent agenda? All right, hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, hearing none, the motion carries 7-0. Next item is our report from the Chief of Police.
Thank you, Mr. President. The only item I have tonight is brief. We will be adding extra patrols on Thanksgiving Eve. Even in the uncharted territory of this holiday before Thanksgiving with COVID, with the reduced hours of licensed establishments and the limited seating capacity, we don't know what to expect. And this has traditionally been a night that threatens public safety. So we'll have additional patrols out addressing traffic infractions and DUI suppression. And that's all I have, sir.
Thank you. Any members of council have questions for Chief? Hearing none, we will move on to our engineer's report.
Hi there, can everyone hear me? Awesome. So for the general updates, I have nothing else to add other than what was included in my report that was provided to council with their packets. So unless anyone has any specific questions about the items in the general update, I'd be happy to move right into the key projects.
Hearing none, take it away.
Awesome. So Main and Afton intersection, at the last council meeting, I was asked to reach out to Armour and Sons to find out what would it look like to possibly shave down the extra length of the pedestrian signal poles. And Fred told me that it would be cheaper to have that be included on one of their regular maintenance days. That way they don't have to be subject to prevailing wages, which they would be if we decided to include it on the existing open Main and Afton project. And he said that most likely it wouldn't be more than $400, about $100 per pole to do that work.
Thank you very much for checking on that. I mean, that sounds like extremely reasonable to me. And I just wonder, when would we need to, when's the next scheduled time? Do you know?
I don't know the typical maintenance schedule.
Okay.
Paula might know that more than I do.
I mean, is that something, being at that low cost, that we could just, you know, as council, would we just vote on that to include it in the next maintenance? And does anyone else have any opinions on that?
This is purely aesthetic, right?
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm. So basically, the only PennDOT requirement for the pedestrian signals is that they have a 7-foot clearance. And then the contractor just bought 14-foot poles because it's easier and cheaper to buy things in bulk. And so they placed them at about 8 feet. And so there's like 2 to 3 feet of extra pole above them, and shaving them off and recapping them does not impact any of PennDOT's standards.
Yeah, I mean, if we can find $400 cost save somewhere else, that's fine. But I mean, $400 is $400 that we do not have right now.
Yeah, so we can do it when we need to do it. But the thing is, the project was just done, and the issue, which I think was a very legitimate issue, was raised, that it changed the architectural integrity of that intersection, but more than we would like. And so I think it's, you know, a relatively cheap fix that doesn't fix the whole thing, but I think it would move towards that. So I just don't want it to be forgotten about, but I understand we don't, when we have the money, we need to just, make sure it doesn't get like shoved away and forgotten. And then when we want to do it, it becomes $4,000 instead of $400.
I don't think the cost of it should increase. And I think the fact that Fred acknowledged it's much cheaper to wrap it into a regular scheduled maintenance session versus trying to put it in this current open project means there's really not a time rush.
Okay, so can we look at that for, maybe Paula, could you make a note to look at that for 2021 and kind of see how things are going?
Absolutely.
Maybe, how often do you know how often the maintenance gets done on that?
The only time we really do maintenance is whenever there's streetlights out. With a new intersection like that, they don't need regular maintenance there, but whenever we do a streetlight survey and bring out armor, then that's when it sounds like they'll do it.
Okay, so let's just discuss it it might be a while because it's all LED. It doesn't require new bulbs. So let's discuss it next time there's maintenance and we'll see where we're at.
Yeah, I don't mean to discount your point, Uri. We literally are going through the budget and cutting
Of course.
a dollar here, a dollar there, and trying
Of course.
Yeah.
Before we go on, I saw a hand from Ms. Taylor, so go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, regarding this subject, had the Main and Afton intersection been reviewed in terms of the Yardley Borough Historic District? This item would have been addressed at this time, and unfortunately it wasn't reviewed for its impact on the historic district. So I am very much in agreement not to incur additional expense, but very much agree with Mr. Finer's statement that it should not be forgotten and not left for a very long time to take care of.
Thank you. And I see a hand from Mr. Guidotti. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, good evening. My only request is that right now, we don't know exactly how much we are going to cut off of these, 3 feet, 4 feet, 2 feet, 1 feet. Is there a chance that we could have a discussion with the Historical Society to see how much they would like to remove so that everybody's in agreement and we don't have to do it twice?
I think I just assumed we were going to tell them to cut off as much as they can.
But would that satisfy the historical group? Because we may cut it off, and if it doesn't satisfy the historical group, then we have to go back and revisit this again.
But if you can't cut it anymore, does it matter?
I think we could probably worry about, these details when the time comes to actually engage with the project. So sort of conceptual for now, and when the maintenance comes around, we can review those details.
Yeah. And then I did try to do some backtracking about what the original process was with this, and found that there was some evidence that there was a discussion in regards to the look of everything, but that it was made clear that if the borough were to deviate from PennDOT standards, it would be an extra cost that would not be covered by the grant funding. And so at that point in time, no additional efforts were made to look into the alternates that are available with, you can put on different kinds of aprons on the bottom of the poles and things like that. And you can, there's other adornments that you can have.
Understood. All right, on to your next item.
Okay, the next project is Mary Arley Bridge replacement. So the DVRPC Trails Grant went out last week. We were very grateful for the quick turnaround from Friends of the Delaware Canal with their support letter, as well as GCNR and the Bucks County Planning Commission. We received an email back saying that they got our application and all was well. And then we will expect to hear back about that grant around July. Additionally, we are having a site visit tomorrow to verify whether or not we need additional survey points to capture the elevation project that wrapped up. We reached out to DCNR to see if they had any plans to create as-built so that we wouldn't have to bother with additional survey, but they are not. So hopefully we're fine with what we captured last year, but if not, we'll let you guys know. I don't think we would need any additional budget for it, just based off of looking at things the other day. I think we can fit it in what we already have. And then while they're out there looking at that issue, they're going to also be verifying whether or not the erosion on the west abutment behind the cast in place concrete, if the erosion has worsened, and help us determine if the original plan to just have some light grading and stabilization will address that, or if more needs to be done to make sure we're not leaving a mess that will undermine that abutment, since we are not doing any kind of structural work to that at this point.
Matt, go ahead.
Thank you. Hey, Liz, you mentioned July on the grant, and I was thinking as you were talking, so I may have missed it, but does the timing of the grant that you referenced related to this project have any correlation to when or not we may start work, or are those things entirely separate? I was just curious how that related, if at all.
I don't think we will allow it to really impact the schedule too much. The way that we kind of put forth the application was so that we would be using it primarily for the construction aspect and not necessarily a lot of the design work. So it really shouldn't hold anything up. I think we're hopeful that we're going to be putting this out to bid in the spring and then starting construction in the summer.
Okay, thank you.
I'm seeing it from Ms. Taylor. Go ahead.
You're muted.
I know, sorry. So going by what you just said, do you anticipate that construction will begin in the spring? Because I was asked by the treasurer of the Friends of the Delaware Canal when the Friends could anticipate turning over the funds.
We are definitely hopeful of that. It will depend on how the borough decides to get us to the, I guess, that finish line of having enough funds to get all the way through construction, since we're still short of that. However, the line of credit was taken out. So it will depend more on that about when we actually go to construction. But from the design standpoint, we will have a finalized bid package and permitting by the end of spring. That's the timeline that we're on.
Okay, good. I'm actually relieved to hear you say that you will reevaluate whether the west abutment needs fill behind the wing walls, because that did come up in the RVE's inspection in 2014, and then again in the DCNR's engineers inspection in 2018. So unless someone miraculously has come in and dumped dirt or whatever behind those walls, I think there's still an erosion problem that needs to be addressed. And certainly it will be the time to do it during this construction. I'm pleased to announce that the private fundraising for the project is very close at this point to exceeding $35,000. So
That's awesome.
Members of the public have come forth very generously in favor of the project. So that's a good thing.
Very much so. Wonderful to hear. All right, do we have any other questions about Mary Arley Bridge, or can we move on to the next project?
You're good.
All right. The next project is the Pico property. The only thing we have here is the need for council to make a motion to put together a formal offer letter that mentions the need to, the contingency of the grant, so that we can move forward with negotiations with Pico.
Right, do we hear a motion to that effect?
Yeah, I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to put together agreement of sale contingent on receiving grant funds in that sale for the amount of the appraised value. So I think that's, sorry if the wording isn't clear there, but basically an agreement. I make a motion to commission the solicitor to put together an agreement of sale contingent on receiving grant funds for the appraised value of the Pico lot.
I think it needs to be just an offer letter first to begin the negotiations with Pico. I don't think we're at the sales agreement yet, just for clarity, and maybe Bucky can address that.
Yeah, that's what I was expecting, that we would just submit a formal offer letter, just stating the desire of the borough to purchase the property and at, at what cost, which I assume the borough manager could send, or we could send as solicitor, whatever council prefers.
I think that makes sense because we're not going to have an outside date or any contingencies, right? So we just want to get, we're just trying to form a dialogue and explore price, right? So
exactly, yeah.
All right, let me revise that motion. I make a motion for the solicitor to send an offer agreement for the purchase of the Pico lot contingent on receiving grant funds.
Second.
All right, that motion is made and made by Mr. McCann, seconded by Mr. Ross. Any questions or comments from council? Right. Any questions or comments from the public? And I see Ms. Taylor, go ahead and mute yourself.
I am unmuted. Surprise.
There you go.
Is this a comment on that motion? I have a sort of auxiliary comment about the Pico lot.
Let's dispense with the motion then, and I'll come back. Any other comments regarding the motion to draft the offer letter? All right, hearing none, I will call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, that motion carries 7-0. All right, so now, Ms. Taylor, let's go back and your auxiliary comment regarding the sale.
You have noticed the Delaware Canal State Park. Thank you. Has finished with the towpath elevation between the Mary Yardley Footbridge and Summers Bridge, and it's looking great. There's grass coming up already. The park used the Pico lot as their staging area, and the part of the lot that they used actually looks better because they did leave stone behind. Many of the depressions in that lot that pre-existed the park's use still exist. And I am hoping, if it comes down to it, that the borough would back up the Delaware Canal State Park in saying that those depressions were not a result of our use of the lot. It's pretty popular to say, oh, it's the canal's fault, no matter what happens. And in this case, I don't feel that it would be fair for the Delaware Canal State Park to be responsible for regrading the entire Pico lot when they didn't utilize the entire Pico lot.
Has Pico said something to them?
Not yet.
Okay.
We will cross that bridge, maybe the Guidotti bridge, when we get there. Great, thank you. Any other final comments or questions regarding the Pico lot? All right, hearing none, on to the next.
And then last but not least, North Main sidewalk. Right now, we are sort of in a holding pattern with PennDOT. We just need some forward direction from them about the HOP permit and what comes next, specifically in regards to moving the utility poles outside giving enough room in the right of way for the sidewalk alignment. So once we kind of hear back from them about how that needs to proceed, we will continue moving forward with our design. We are currently incorporating the comments that we received from some of the residences, but we were also discussing whether or not it would be prudent to have some sort of meeting for all of them to join, just because not everybody is familiar with construction drawings or engineering plans and may fully understand what was sent to them. And we just want to make sure that this time around with this project, nobody feels blindsided. So I don't know what the proper way to host a meeting like that is during the pandemic, and was hoping council could weigh in on that.
Yeah, I mean, we can give that some thought. I think, maybe just posting, or it is difficult to do, but we could probably schedule out a separate Zoom session and just post on the website, social media, that we would be holding that. I guess we could, how many individual properties do you know offhand?
I don't. Paula, do you?
Even just ballpark? I think, because we could just deliver a flyer as well.
Yeah, I want to say it's not more than a dozen. Does that sound right, Paula?
Right, I think it's about 10.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can maybe circle back on that, but I think if it's only 10 or so, we could, we could just post that we're going to hold it, but for the properties directly affected, perhaps, giving them a flyer to indicate the specific time.
Liz, I think I'm one of the 10, so if you want to host it on the back porch, you're welcome to. I don't know if we're allowed to do that anymore, but we could figure out something. I don't think it'll be a big undertaking.
Okay. Yeah, we could do something like that. I don't, like David said earlier, I know new restrictions might be coming out, so I don't know if that precludes things. But hopefully we could figure out a way to manage something like that.
I think to David's point, we can figure it out between flyers or something. Even if, when Rich and Ryan and others and Matt, like at times, they've just walked it and a few people have met on the front of the house and we've kind of had conversations. I think we can hopefully schedule something that won't be too invasive, but effective.
Okay.
Yeah, I have no problem doing the walk if I have to again. I've done it many times before.
Matt Ross, being Public Works, do you want to take lead on getting this set up?
Yep, no problem. We'll take care of it.
All right.
Then I believe that concludes my report, unless anybody has any other outstanding questions.
Okay, I don't see any, so I think we are good there.
Awesome.
Thank you. Our next agenda item is our manager's report.
Okay, besides my regular update that I already submitted with the packet, Patty and I continue to spend numerous hours on the budget with council members and some members of the public, which is awesome. With the current resurgence, we're starting to rethink our holiday market that we were going to host at the farmer's market. I know the farmer's market could continue because that's mostly food, but with holiday items, I don't know if it's still a good idea to do something like that. So we're going to re-look at that and see if we should host it in December. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the borough manager?
I just want to, so if we can have outdoor events, right, as far as I know right now, so if we needed more space, couldn't we do the holiday market on Fitzgerald Field?
We could, but we were doing it in conjunction with the farmer's market since they already have a crowd there to begin with. But with the farmer's market, it's all food. That's why they were always able to continue throughout even the strictest of COVID period.
Right.
So I don't know. It's, if you guys have any comments on it, or Wes and I will make the executive decision. It's
okay.
Are you concerned that that will be ordered by the county or the state not to have an outdoor event that's not food related. Is that what you mean? Or the actual safety of the event?
The safety of the
yeah.
event, plus if we're ordered to do
Right.
anything by, which I don't
Yeah.
think the state's gonna jump in, but one never knows.
So I'm trying to remember the holiday market in the past, how much space, like if it could be set up so that there was a sufficient space the way the farmer's market is, that
Right, well,
people
Wes and I
outside-
did,
yeah.
we went to Buttonwood and he brought his
Okay.
measure and we could fit about 20 vendors going towards Penn Valley. So we could
Right.
spread out that way a good 6 feet apart, but I'm sure we're still gonna do it.
Yeah.
As long as somebody says, no, not a good idea, don't do it.
Yeah.
But
My
just
only
throwing it
thoughts
out there.
about this and this is personally, and I'm all for being careful, is just something that is sufficiently spread out, even if we have to limit the number of people or take
Mhm.
more space than normal, just gives people something nice happening that
Sure.
is maybe helpful, because instead of people reacting by having indoor gatherings, at least they're having an outdoor gathering where they can satisfy some of their need to connect in the safest way, considering. So that's my input on it.
Okay,
But
perfect.
I respect whatever you guys come up with.
Excellent. And then also our little library was installed and I hope everybody goes and visits it. There is books already in there, some kids books all the way up to adult books as well. So I give Donovan a lot of credit. He was out there a whole day, him and his brothers and his dad did a great job. There's an article about it in the Advance as well. So this was a good thing.
It's very cute. I put some kids' Christmas books in there yesterday.
Oh, is that you? Okay, I saw them today. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else, Paula?
Nope, that's it for me.
All right. Anyone have, members of council have questions for the borough manager? All right, I see one from the public. Dr. Perlmutter, go ahead, unmute yourself.
Hi, I was not allowed to be in the budget portion of the meeting where you discussed your proposed budget. You said that you are still working on it. Could you give some more specific details? What are you working on with it?
We were going over with council members and a member of the public that had some questions as well. We constantly look at it. We update our current numbers, see where we're at to see if we can adjust for next year. It's a living, breathing document that continues to live and breathe even once we adopt it. So it's always a working document.
So you did meet with a member of the public. Am I allowed to be a member of the public that meets with you? Because I was not allowed to attend the meeting. I had a number of questions. I don't want to bring them up here, but is that possible? Because apparently someone else was able to do that.
Absolutely. And as we said numerous times before, we would welcome anybody that would like to come in and talk about the budget and ask questions.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Matt Curtin, go ahead.
David, I was just going to offer that Carolyn and I are happy, and Kim, whoever, to host these meetings. Carolyn's offered to host a couple already with anybody like Dr. Perlmutter or Mr. Carlson, anyone that wants to go through and ask questions. And I thought the last one was super instructive and it was great. So if we want to do more, we're all trying to get to the right answer. And I think these discussions help us do it. So that's great.
Absolutely. And we did that via Zoom, Dawn. So if that's something you're interested in, let us know.
Yeah, we're trying to find the right equation here. So in past years, we had budget working sessions and no one showed up. So the one-on-one seemed to be more popular. So if you are interested, anyone on the call, please reach out to Paula and we'll schedule.
Thank you. And Zoom's not a problem at all. That would be great.
Good. Okay. And then Mr. Brea, I do have one more thing. We had a resignation from our Civil Service Commission. Brian Marshall resigned. I would just suggest that one of our alternates be moved up and then we look for another alternate, but we need to, or council needs to accept his resignation.
All right, is there a motion then to accept Mr. Marshall's resignation from the Civil Service Commission?
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion was made by Mr. Ross, seconded by Ms. Thompson. Are there any questions or discussion on the motion from either council or the public?
Practically speaking, what happens if we don't accept it?
And he's forced to stay on forever. No.
Poor Brian.
Yeah.
I've always wondered that.
Me too.
I think they have to complete the term that they were appointed to.
Right.
Yes.
All right, if there are no further questions, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion carries 7-0. And then Paula, do we have an alternate now? So could we just, and maybe Bucky weigh in too, could we just do a second motion that would move that alternate up to the commission?
Yes, Brian Welch at the last meeting did express interest in being a full member instead of an alternate.
Okay, I don't think Brian is on with us
Yeah,
tonight.
I don't think he is.
But lucky him, he might get a promotion. So is there a motion from council to appoint Brian Welch to the Civil Service Commission with a term ending, I don't have it in front of me, but whatever Brian Marshall's term would have been.
So moved.
Second.
All right, that motion was made by Mr. Ross, seconded by Mr. Feiner. Any questions, comments, concerns from council or the public? All right, hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I'll send out letters to both tomorrow, and that concludes my report.
Thank you. Next up is Mr. Klosser for a solicitor's report.
Thank you, but I have no report this evening.
All right, thank you. Take us over to Mayor Harding for your report.
Hey, thank you. Just real quickly, wanted to take a moment to thank Chief Kelly, his department, Yardley Borough staff, including Manager Johnson, and council members, including Councilmember Siegel Morris, for their involvement in the Veterans Day ceremonies that went on. I know it means a lot to the veterans for everyone to come out. And I know those of you that couldn't make it were there in spirit, but I just want to recognize those that were there. So we appreciate their efforts, and more so Chief Kelly, who was able to bring a large portion of his department, some of who are veterans, in on that time to work the event. So thank you very much. And that's my report.
All right, thank you. Next up, we'll move through our council member reports. So anything you may have to share, we'll begin with Mr. Curtin.
Okay, thank you. Was fortunate to be able to spend some time with Michael Thompson, who chairs the Environmental Advisory Commission. To get up to speed, really, was really understanding what they do, how they work, and the current project that they're working on, which is a grant that they received, analyzing the watershed related to Bach and Buck Creek and how that flows into Lake Afton, in order to better understand and come up with plans for how we can take care of it better and preserve it and deal with some of the algae and other things. So very interesting project, very technically above my level of expertise, although that admittedly is a low bar. But it was neat getting to talk to him. He did mention, Liz, I think he's looking for something from the lab in terms of a quote, which I don't know what the next step is on that, but I'm happy to help with that if that's something I'm supposed to do, or maybe you have already underway. That's the only project that they have ongoing at the moment, and I'll report back once there's more to discuss.
All right, thank you. Next up is Mr. Ross.
Yeah, Public Works met earlier. We pretty much discussed all of everything with Liz's report, so nothing to report.
Thank you. Move on, Ms. Siegel Morris.
Nothing to report this evening.
Thank you. I have nothing to report myself, so we'll move on to Ms. Thompson.
General government met tonight. Nothing specific to report. I did have a question for the solicitor. I don't know if you saw my email, but it pertains to council. So we've been working on Paula's performance review in previous years. Just general government chair and president kind of conversed and came up with ratings, but we were thinking this year we would like to get everyone to provide performance ratings in each category so that we could get more of a holistic picture of everything that Manager Johnson does and come up with an average number. And we just weren't sure, Bucky, if we're allowed to do that with sunshine laws.
Yeah, I did get the email. Thank you. And we're taking a look at that and we'll get a response to you probably tomorrow.
Okay, perfect. So if we're permitted to do that, then everyone on council, you will be receiving some sort of survey that I would be thankful if you could complete that in the next week so we can get the performance review wrapped up. That's all I have to report.
Thank you. Moving on to Mr. McCann.
I'll just report that since the Thanksgiving holiday is approaching, how thankful I am to work with a great group of people here on council, a great borough manager and police chief. So thanks, everyone. It's been a pleasure this first year serving. So
It's the nicest thing anyone has said all day. Thank you, and I actually mean it. Thank you, John. And finally, Mr. Feiner.
I have no report. Thanks.
It's a tough act to follow, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I won't even try.
All right. All right, moving on.
But it has been a pleasure being here with you all. You're doing great jobs.
Thank you. All right, moving on. Our next item this evening is just for discussion. So we will not be holding a vote, but we are going to discuss the floodplain ordinance. And I am not going to try to dive into this myself, but I see that we have Susan Mazzatelli here with us tonight, who knows all things floodplain, and she can be assisted by Borough Manager Johnson. So maybe if we could just begin with a brief, and this was in the packet, but just for everyone here in the public, a brief history of this draft ordinance. It feels like we've been looking at this thing for well over a year. So maybe Paula, if you want to start with that piece, just sort of what we've been through already in terms of council and committees looking at this, and then we can maybe then go into an overview of what some of these changes are and open it up for questions.
Okay, so the original ordinance was adopted in July of 2014. Then in 2018, there was some talk of a review and amendment. In 2018, we changed fences and uses prohibited in the ordinance as well, and that was adopted, like I said, in 2018. Planning Commission has reviewed and they made proposed amendments that they would like to see in May of 2019. Planning Commission had a few items that were wording that were able to easily be taken care of, and then there were some other items that were a little bit larger. We went to FEMA, to PEMA. Susan was very instrumental in helping guide this to get some changes. I added in the packet some of the changes. I don't know if you want to go over each one of them, such as, let me see. Cumulative substantial damage, adding worded verbiage on that, increased cost compliance, adding definitions for that. We're talking about driveways in the floodplain, making them pervious. This way it allows people to have driveways. Talking about floodproofing structures in different zones. Some people talk about garages, and we're going up to a 400 square feet, not to exceed. But everything that we did so far, like I said, went through FEMA and PEMA, and we talked to our CRS people to make sure. So the ordinance that we sent to you on Friday, or I'm sorry, was it Monday, is pretty much clean, besides some just prettying it up. So does anybody have any questions? Because Susan's here.
Matt, Kurt, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Paula, maybe we just take a step back on the process. And again, I appreciate I may be way behind on this, but as Mr. Guidotti knows, I'm trying to get more up to speed on the floodplain stuff. So does this go through planning? And did this go through planning? And this is sort of like, what's the process of how we got to what was sent to us? That's the part I wasn't clear on.
It did go through planning already and they made their suggestions. So then we took their suggestions, spoke to, like I said, FEMA, PEMA.
Got it.
And just to see what was allowed, what wasn't allowed, so that we don't jeopardize our CRS rating as well.
Right. And allowed, when you say allowed, this is more just me trying to understand. We could do whatever we want in theory, but there's a consequence in that it affects the CRS rating, right? So what we're trying to do is solve for the flexibility without impacting the CRS score. Is that a fair way to characterize it?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Susan?
Go ahead.
I also wanted to add, it's not just about CRS, but it is about Yardley's good standing with FEMA and the NFIP. So, you know, the purpose of the floodplain ordinance is to limit the loss of life, damage, you know, to structures and flooding. So it's really about also our good standing with the NFIP, which nets a lot of really good things for the community.
Right. That's a goodwill. That's a goodwill of, we know that we've been a frequent user of, you know, their aid at various times. It's realistic to assume we probably will be again. And so there's some element of, there's an ongoing relationship that we're trying to preserve by being responsible. Is that fair?
Yeah, well, we're talking about possibility of millions on the table in the near future. So yes, it's the community is the beneficiary of all of the good things that it's been doing with this floodplain ordinance, and, you know, being a steward of that ordinance and staying with, you know, the spirit of it and its restrictions. Yeah.
And I know, you know, we have talked about this a lot. Something I just like to remind everyone of, and Susan, you may know the numbers better than I do, but I do believe that tiny Yardley Borough is the largest recipient in the county when it comes to those claims. You know, I know a lot of that's changed because not all the properties are there anymore, but at one time there were a lot of severe repetitive loss properties, and Rivermar is a very low-lying area compared to some of our neighbors.
Yeah, Yardley Borough has filed and received over $25 million in flood claims since flood claims have been recorded. It's a lot.
All right. So as I said, we're not putting this up for a vote this evening. We just wanted to get it on the agenda to sort of restart this conversation. It's been a while since we had motion on this, but we did a lot of good work, and it's time to wrap that up. So I'll open it up for further questions. Mr. Guidotti, I see your hand up. So why don't you unmute yourself and go ahead?
Sure. Yeah, the Planning Commission as a group of 7 did put a lot of time into reading each and every word of the planning of this floodplain ordinance. We all understand that it is voluntary, that the community participates. And it not voluntarily participating does cause consequences. As it is right now, I just would like to ask Ms. Mazzatelli if the current ordinance as it's written still requires that anyone who does want to construct a garage larger than 400 square feet would be required to modify their deed in Doylestown to give up their fee simple title absolute as the ordinance is written right now.
Well, I don't know if you'd have to go so far as changing your fee simple deed. What that would require, if the ordinance is put into place with 400 square feet maximum, the property owner would have to ask for a variance. And Yardley Borough should not be issuing variances loosely, because that is something that would affect Yardley Borough's good standing, because FEMA has the right to inspect all of our building folders, regardless if we were CRS or not. And every time a variance is given in the floodplain for something which is against a regulation in the floodplain, it is a mark against the community. So you're not just, you're hurting the community.
Okay, but it is true that even if a variance is granted, you must modify your deed in Doylestown to accommodate that, correct?
I have to be honest with you, I don't know the answer to that, but I can find out for you. I've never heard of that.
That is, it actually is written in the ordinance and in the recommendations. And truly, all of these are not mandated, they are recommendations. We are concerned that if FEMA wanted to have everybody modify their deed for certain variances, that they would have made it mandatory. They did not. They only made it a recommendation, thereby putting Yardley on the hook for the consequences and make the possible lawsuits that could result due to the taking of property's value. I'm not so sure that Yardley wants to put themselves on the hook for those kinds of consequences.
Do you,
But we can go on.
do you have the section of the ordinance that I'm searching for this, a section that refers to this deed?
Sure. Yeah. I could probably find it. It might take a few minutes, but yes, I can.
While you're looking for that, there was a question on chat. Susan Mazzatelli, can you just introduce yourself to the
Sure.
public and how you're related to the borough and what you do for us?
Sure. I'm actually a floodplain mitigation specialist and consultant. And I actually came on board with the borough maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And about 4 or 5 years ago. And I came on as a project manager for the FEMA FMA 2014 and FMA 2015 elevation projects that happened within the borough, and basically managed all aspects of that. And then with the managing of the elevation projects, also, it all ties together with all floodplain issues. And I assisted Wes and Paula with helping them finish up CRS, and, always field questions from homeowners, and have also been filing for new elevation grants on behalf of the municipality, and also dealing with floodplain ordinance issues. And I work for other communities as well. I've been doing this for over 15 years. And I'm also a CFM, which is a certified floodplain manager.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm actually.
You went on mute there, Pete.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, there's a number of questions that we still have open that we're curious about. But FEMA's Region 3 memo, accessory structures in the special flood hazard area, it lists down here that, let me see, page 1, 2, 3. It talks about the accessory structures. Let's see if we can find this. It says the upper limit used in this language is less than 600 square feet. Excuse me. Let me just turn that off if I could. I didn't realize that was on, everyone. All right, let's see, where is this? Where was I reading?
We were looking for the
Okay, yeah, if the upper limit used in this language is less than 600 square feet, the community must include a provision on a variance section, and the variances to the accessory structure size limit are not to exceed 600 square feet. This is suggested language within FEMA's own documentation. I don't know
So
where.
it's not in our current ordinance right now, Pete?
That's true, but
It
this
is
is
not,
what
okay.
it is not, but this is coming from their documentation saying that, 600 is not unusual.
But Pete, we had discussions at length with Leslie Rhodes and FEMA and PEMA about that 600 square feet. That 600 square feet really is a necessary thing in an agricultural setting. And it's really more, and they guided us to the density and the size of the lots and the properties in Yardley Borough. And they felt 400, they really think 200 is where we should be, but gave us 400. 600 is really leading towards agricultural properties that have the ability and need for those type of structures.
There are locations and there are lots within Borough that for zoning can accommodate up to 600 square feet. Not every one of them is a postage stamp. There are some that have more than ample room. So this is one of the concerns that I think still needs to be reviewed. Maybe not every single property would handle up to 400 or even up to 600. But those that can meet the zoning requirements as they sit, I don't believe should be restricted by this if the homeowner is willing to assume the risk that goes along with it and pay for the additional flood insurance. If actually garages that are not attached, detached garages are not insured by FEMA, and they don't reimburse you unless you pay some additional for an addendum to your policy. But on a basic policy, detached garages aren't even covered.
Thank you.
So that's one concern that we have, but there are others.
Thanks. I just like to move on from that point. I don't want to get too in the weeds.
Sure, exactly.
But what I do want to mention from a process point of view is, as Susan mentioned, we have had extended conversations with the representatives from PEMA regarding this. And there are also a number of points in this ordinance where we've heard the recommendations from Planning Commission. And 400 is the number that the council is moving forward with. That is
well, I haven't heard a vote on that yet.
Correct, but that is what is in the draft. That is what had been discussed and worked out in the drafting process up until that point. Planning Commission did review. We heard those suggestions, and this is how we are moving forward at this time. There is still time for it to be amended. Members of council choose to do so. You know, this is a big ordinance. There's always going to be a point in it that somebody's going to have a question about, but that's where we stand on this point.
Okay, I understand that as of now, the ordinance says about 400, and some lots can actually handle quite a bit more, but so that's one issue, but there are others.
I want to move on from this. We've
a
couple minutes there. So Susan, I saw you had just something you wanted to add in quickly. And then
I just wanted to say quickly that property owners have the right to apply for a permit and get a and request a variance if they need 600 square feet. And it can be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. If somebody owns 3 acres in the borough and can prove a hardship and say, I have a working farm or whatever the reason is. So it's not something that is absolute. The ordinance is at 400 and it can be dealt with on a case-by-case basis.
All right, we're gonna, when I see Dr. Perlmutter, you had a hand up.
Yes, thank you. You know, more than half our town has property in the floodplain. I lived in Rivermar at ground zero. I was part of 3 floods. I have talked to Susan Mazzatelli before, and I would just like to know, I understand you have expertise in this. Do you live in the borough? Are you a resident here? I just feel that I'd like to also know exactly how much money have you made as a consultant from FEMA? Because that absolutely affects your decisions on this.
Dr. Perlmutter, we are wading into territory that I don't think it's appropriate to take.
Why don't you think it's appropriate? You like to give other people's property away. We understand that because you don't own property in the borough, but other people.
You and we are going to move on.
I had a quick question regarding the flood warrants, if I may.
You know, yes, go ahead. Just since your name's not up there, if you could just state your name, address for the record.
Yeah, sure, not a problem. Peter Guidotti Jr., thinking about moving back to Yardley. I've been continuing to think about it for quite some time. What I just wanted to comment on regarding the flood ordinance is, you know, being a resident of Yardley Borough for more or less my entire life and seeing the garage in the back of the house, saying that somebody can apply for an ordinance when the reality is it's going to be shot down pretty much when you apply for it. Seems disingenuous to me. You know, and I think throwing that up as an option for someone who has been working on the flood and ordinance for quite some time and is directly affected by it is just not something that should be said unless it's realistically going to be an option. Thank you.
Thank you. And Wes, I see you have a hand up.
Good evening, Mr. President. Just a couple quick things related to the 200, 400, 600 square feet issue. If I sent everyone some time ago a copy of the model ordinance put out by the state of Pennsylvania. They clearly use the number 200 square feet of floor coverage. So that is a number based out of the state recommendations. As far as, I'm going to jump off here, I'm sorry.
All right. Thank you.
So, sir, I just was wondering, so we can keep this moving and I don't want it to fall through the cracks. So we will clean it up as is and then bring it back to you. So do we anticipate maybe going out to advertise soon or like next month and for possible adoption in January, just so we can get a timeline?
I think that makes sense. As I said, we put in a lot of work on this and then we sort of hit a wall and then COVID happened. Right. But a lot of the work has been done. So I don't want to pick it up and rush it through. Right. You know, why we began with this discussion point tonight. You know, I think we certainly, with something this detailed, it would be appropriate for written questions to come in so we could provide detailed answers to folks that may want those. You know, particularly with ordinances this complex, it's sometimes hard in a meeting session, especially over Zoom, to give all those detailed answers. So I don't have a strict timeline laid out, but I think advertising in December with adoption in January is not an unreasonable timeline to consider.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, any other final comments on that? And Wes, was your hand up from before, or was that just?
That's a new one. I'm sorry. I'm working right now, so I had to.
No, it sounded like you stopped mid-comment, so I'll give you.
I had something. Just to answer a previous comment, I do attend the zoning hearing board meetings whenever there's a floodplain issue on the agenda. And I want to say that recently there was an issue that was a hardship for a resident. They presented their argument and the zoning hearing board took that into consideration and granted the variance. So I think we owe the zoning hearing board the benefit of the doubt in these situations when a true hardship is presented. Thank you.
I'd like to comment on that if I could.
We're gonna move.
I don't want to put you guys up or anything like that, but I'm just curious as to who is the arbiter of what is the definition of a hardship and who adjudicates that.
I can answer that, Mr. President. The definition of the hardship is actually spelled out in the ordinance, and that is the duty of the zoning hearing board to determine whether or not the argument put forth by the applicant is valid or not.
Is there an appeals process for that?
There is. It would be going to county court.
Thank you.
All right. Let's wrap up with this then. I believe we've heard from everybody. With any final items, any other business this evening before we adjourn? All right, hearing none, we'll take that last motion. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion was made by Ms. Thompson, seconded by Mr. Ross. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.